Alexis Jay. She's a professor at Strathclyde University, but much more importantly, she's worked in child protection and social services for more than 30 years. Also, more recently, she was in charge of the inquiry into child sexual exploitation in Rotherham. That report pulled no punches. It found that something like 1,400 children had been abused between 1997 and 2013. The Home Secretary has said she has a strong track record in uncovering the truth. She is already a panel member of the inquiry, so she knows it well. Keith Vaz, who's the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, has been slightly more sanguine and simply said, "I hope it will be fourth time lucky."
It has been a troubled inquiry.
Huge problems ever since it was planned to launch in 2014. The first chair, Baroness Butler-Sluss, stood down after connections and concerns were raised about her late brother Sir Michael Havers, who was Attorney General. Then we had Dame Fiona Woolf, she stood down. And then just last week we had Dame Lowell Goddard, who was the New Zealand judge who was appointed. She stood down saying actually there were many, many difficulties within the inquiry because of its legacy of failure, and she thought it should have been abandoned and started completely afresh.
The last three people in charge were lawyers. Professor Jay isn't.
That's the really interesting thing about this. She has no formal legal background, and there will be concerns. This is a massive inquiry, may last as long as 10 years, requires expert legal knowledge of process and a legal brain to marshal evidence. But I suppose on the other side, she is very ably assisted by Ben Emerson QC, hugely respected advocate and an expert on human rights law. So I suppose you could say they've possibly now got the right chairman, but via completely the wrong process.
The first head of this inquiry, Baroness Butler-Sluss, quit. Then her replacement, Dame Fiona Woolf, stepped down too, both over questions about perceived links to the establishment. Now Dame Lowell Goddard has also resigned, little more than a year after she spoke about the scale of the role she'd taken on.
The task ahead of us is daunting. The sexual abuse of children over successive generations has left permanent scars.
Today, Dame Goddard said taking the job had meant relinquishing my career in New Zealand and leaving behind my beloved family. She cited a legacy of failure around the inquiry and said, with hindsight, it would have been better to have started completely afresh. So where does this leave the survivors of abuse? Decades ago, Reverend Graham Sawyer was abused by a church bishop who was only recently jailed. Graham's still waiting to give his evidence to this inquiry.
I'm filled with sadness about this, but we've got to pick ourselves up and make sure that someone competent is appointed soon. But she took this on. She knew that it was going to be at least 5 years. There must be a bigger reason behind this. Why she's resigned, and we've got to find that out.
Dame Goddard's resignation comes amid reports she spent 3 months overseas, working and on holiday in the first year of her £500,000 job. Her decision to quit will prompt speculation of friction within the inquiry. She's been asked to appear before MPs to give a fuller explanation.
She seemed to say that there should have been changes made from the old inquiry that they didn't do. I think the people running the inquiry need to understand that and make changes very quickly.
The government says this inquiry into churches, councils, politicians, security services, the army and many more institutions will continue without delay. But campaigners say losing its chairwoman is a huge setback.
To me, she was never a good fit, but I do feel the way she's suddenly gone, I just feel and worry about the impact that will have had on those who survived. Do they feel let down? How badly do they feel let down? They've certainly been unsettled.
Graham never expected this inquiry to be a simple process. After waiting so long to tell his story, he hopes a new chair will be in place soon to keep it on course. Peter Lane, 5 News.